Negotiations part 2. I'm going to get into the actual technicalities of what an offer is and how to negotiate and what it represents going back and forth between two parties, the buyer and the seller. So I am going to say that for this little negotiation explanation, we are the buyer. We are representing you as a buyer and we are your buying agent. So what ends up happening here is we put an offer together, and in that offer, there is an expiration date on it, or irrevocable as it's called, which is a date and a time. Generally, depending on the situation, because there's many approaches that can happen to this, I will have a conversation with the other agent because it's a lot of paperwork to sign and re-sign if we have to make a lot of changes at the onset. If the selling agent is expecting an offer, I will give them the courtesy of a phone call to ask them what a good irrevocable will be for them. So that gives her and her clients time, courtesy to negotiate the offer back to us if they don't accept it as it stands. So that is called an irrevocable, and there is an expiration date in that irrevocable time. And what has to happen is the receiving party, so in this case, the seller, has to respond to that offer within that time frame. And if they don't, then the offer becomes dead, aka null and void. The object of an agent, in my opinion, is always to keep an offer alive, because then the offer is going back and forth. Actually, the objective is really for them to accept our offer, especially if we've given them a really low price and all the conditions are in favor of my client. And then on the flip side of that, if I'm the selling agent, I'm obviously advocating for the seller. So my job is to advocate for you as a buyer. So this is what happens. We present them the offer, and let's say they decide that they're not happy with all of the terms and conditions that we've put in the offer. Those sorts of things are the closing date, the price, the conditions, the clauses. I'm going to refer to that because this was something that I learned actually from my very first broker, who was an absolutely amazing mentor. And we can write things in an offer in Schedule A, which is a statement or a clause. It's not a condition, but when the seller, on this particular case, if they accept the offer as it stands with a clause in there, something to the effect of, the seller agrees that the home will be in broom swept condition upon closing. That means that when the seller accepts that offer, and that is such a ridiculous clause, by the way, because it is courtesy, common courtesy, that you would leave the home clean for the new buyers to move into your property, but you would be shocked at the amount of people that don't. Anyhow, that is an example of a clause where the seller accepts that and agrees upon closing that the home will be in broom swept condition. So we use clauses and conditions. Conditions have a date. Conditions have an expiration date. So, for example, we will put in something like conditional upon approval of financing, conditional upon approval of home inspection. Those are really narrowed down into very basic words. This is not the legal terminology that we use in an offer, but it gives you an idea and understanding of what it means. So if we're negotiating something, we present the offer, the seller decides, I don't like that offer, I reject it with those conditions, conditions of the price. They reject the closing date. They reject the finance condition. They accept the finance condition, but they reject that we've asked for 14 days, which is ludicrous, and they only want 5 business days. So what happens then is the seller will counter our offer, and we refer to it as a Signback, and they will send it back to us. And then the offer is still alive. The offer will have a new irrevocable that's irrevocable by the seller in this particular case, with a new date and time or the same date and time as what we had initially presented. And then we have to determine what is going on. So one of the things that I will tell you, which is important to understand, is whoever has the offer last is in the power seat. Let me repeat that. Whoever has the offer last is in the power seat. They have the ability to accept the offer or let the offer die. So in my opinion, it's always really important to be in that power seat, because I want my clients to be able to be in that final decision mode to determine, yes, I want to accept the conditions and terms as stated in this contract, or no, I don't want to accept them. As soon as they sign it back, it's in the power seat on the other side, on the seller side. Just note, and always remember this as a buyer or a seller, if you are not in control of the offer, if you are not in the power seat, you are not in control of the sale. So choose wisely when you're negotiating, because don't be extreme. We're not in this COVID situation where things were 100,000 over list, or people are asking for ridiculous terms and conditions any longer. This is something that is, when we are negotiating an offer, we want to ensure that we are within the parameters of an accepting position. So I don't want to present an offer that's really extreme to a seller. I want to present something that is on behalf of our client. I want to ensure that their needs are being met and that the seller will be happy enough that they would consider accepting our offer. Don't lowball. If you lowball, that's a whole other game, because what happens is when you lowball an offer, and by lowball I mean, let's say they're asking $950,000 and you go in with an $800,000 offer. Lowball is they're asking $950,000. I've done my job. I've seen what the comparables are in the area. I know that they've priced the house within a 5% margin, because that's basically what ends up happening is there's generally a 5% margin. That's what home appraisers look at as well. That's what banks look at. So we always want to be within that 5% range when we're listing a property or even putting an offer in on a property, depending on what the market stats are showing us. Don't lowball. When you lowball, this is like playing poker. You play your hand. And then what happens is you take the chance of really angering the seller side, in case you don't care. Like if you don't care that you're going to lose the deal, then have at her, boys, lowball. But I mean, you're also wasting your agent's time as well if you know the results of this. So please ask your agent what their position is on lowballing offers in every case, because every deal is different. I will reiterate that. So if you lowball, you play your hand. And if you push the opposing side to the edge, in this case, the seller, if you push the seller to the edge, then they will push back quite often, because you don't know. I've always said this, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We don't know why they're selling. We don't know what their motivation is. We don't know what their financial situation is. So when you lowball, you take the chance of them pushing back. And then quite often, if you've pissed them off, they won't sign back favorably, and they'll just basically give you a big FU, and they will sell the house for whatever they want because they're in the power seat. So please remember these things, that whoever has the offer last is in the power seat. If you accept the offer, it's firm and binding. I mean, there's been some negotiations on this, some things that have literally gone to court recently. The deposit determines its binding, and then it firms up. So please note this. If you have any questions about this, I think it's really important that both parties know how a good negotiation works, and that we are always advocating on your behalf to get the best deal. And that's it. So this is Negotiations Part 2. Peace out. Love y'all. Ciao for now. Bye.